The country's unity in diversity must not be undermined by campaigns that seek to exploit either of our two major national fault lines, ethnicity and religion. Any injudicious introduction of these two factors into the contestation for votes in any part of the country would be bound to stoke up flames of violence.
There's no acceptable alternative. There's no plan B for free, fair, and credible elections in Nigeria.
The attitude and disposition of parties and candidates will determine to a large extent whether we have peaceful or non-violent elections.
On paper, you can't get to Nigeria. You can't. You can only get to Nigeria in the field. Practical implementation. Go to any ministry, go to any parastatal, you will get administrative instruction how the human beings, the workers in Nigeria should be managed from floor clearing one to the permanent secretary and to the minister when he eventually gets there.
We must redeem our political culture. We must redeem our image.
Nigerians will agree with me. Since I became a president, I have conducted a number of governorship elections, senatorial elections, and others. They are not perfect elections, but they have been reasonably fair. And that's why I say that even the opposition parties should commend me for that. And we promise that we will do more, because I believe that when we conduct our elections must be credible, not just by our own thinking, but everybody must believe that elections are credible.
Well, those are the speeches on the day of the Abuja Accord, which were held last month. Well, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi's letter came before this peace accord, and his recommendations are there. There was a very striking picture that came out of the Abuja peace accord. Was that moment when the two top contenders in the presidential race came together, hugged themselves, and people said, wait a moment, it seems this is working. We may not be having violence in any case. Professor Akinyemi, does these that we have in the peace accord, does it work for you based on your recommendations?
Yes, they are building blocks for peaceful, non-violent elections. Building blocks. And I hope that actually the media will continue to use those clips that you have just shown as their own contribution to sensitizing and educating the Nigerian street as to the need to abide by the accord which their leaders have put pen to paper for.
Interesting. And you talked about a whole number of issues here. One of the things that you said also is making statements, the kind of statement the politicians make, which you say might be divisive. Do you see any change in the attitude and the behavioral pattern of politicians since this letter came out and the peace accord?
Unfortunately, no, I haven't seen that. As I said earlier in this program, politics should be fun. And there should be satire. We should accept satire. We should accept making fun of each other. We should accept people emphasizing differences in ideology, differences in policy. But when it graduates to hate speech, that should be deprecated. Hate speeches are a violation of the accord. Stoning motorcades are a violation of the accord. Incendiary media propaganda should be regarded as violation of the accord. And I'm afraid we have seen all of this, even since the accord was signed. I'm not pleased, I'm not happy with appeals to religious sentiments. One of the most explosive item you could use is to point attention to religious differences, because people feel strongly about their religion, about their beliefs and what have you, and that should not be made the basis of electioneering campaign.
All right. I mean, we talk so much about violence and the fact that the fear is that what happened in 2011, no one wants to see that happen again. And you, of course, a lot of people who were perhaps alive and old enough to know exactly what happened in the 80s, the West Operation Wet here, and those kind of very scary situations. Nobody wants to have that kind of situation happen. But let's look at the preparations of INEC, the readiness of the umpire, which a lot of people are saying, okay, it's going to be important how well the umpire is prepared for these polls. Well, today, the INEC released a statement saying that the deadline for the collection of PVC, which was put at the 31st of January 2015, has been extended to the 8th of February, the Sunday, the 8th of February 2015, which gives voters who have not the over 20 million permanent voters cards lying to be collected should be retrieved by then. That's the hope of INEC. But Professor Akinyemi, do you think INEC is ready for this election?
That's a tough one. I've been at some meetings with Professor Jega, where he has even gone beyond the statement you just read, that they are even considering and will be prepared to even ask people to pick up the PVCs at the polling booth on election day, if it comes to that. So I think that one should give INEC credit that they are trying to do their best to keep within the law, and yet to ensure that as many Nigerians as possible are not disenfranchised. One thing we should point out is nobody so far has accused INEC of being partisan, and that's a good omen. They are talking about their technical capability or incapability on the PVC, but nobody had ever said, oh, we've seen evidence that INEC may be up to some
mischief.
Some mischief. Nobody has said that, and that should be counted as righteousness for Professor Jega. As to whether obviously they are not 100% ready. They themselves have said so. In the period between now and February 14th, if they could get the rest of the PVCs out, then at least from INEC perspective, they scored an A, and we should just continue to push them and hold them to their promise that they will get those PVCs out.
Professor Akinyemi, it's interesting if I use this analogy for someone who has been driving an automatic vehicle and all of a sudden bought a manual vehicle and wants to put it on the road. It might be experiencing some problems. Isn't it similar to the fact that INEC going into this election is using the card reader, a technology that perhaps will be internet-based, will be biometrics-based, and will be largely based on some technicalities that they don't readily have power on, and some of these things that we are not very good at. Internet is not fantastic in this part of the country. So what do you make of the card reader and the permanent use of permanent voter card? Do you think that INEC should test the card reader and the permanent voter card in this election with the critical nature of the 2015 elections?
It's disturbing that even up till now, people are going to serve as polling officers for INEC, have not been trained on the use of this machine. Yes, it is disturbing Well, one must be honest enough. Maybe that's one of the questions again that INEC may have to consider. If they have not trained enough people a week before the elections, should they use what may cause chaos if their own officers are incapable of using that? I think the reason JEGA has gone for all these innovations is to cut down human error. But if it gets to the stage, because you remember also in 2011 elections, that on the day we were supposed to have an election, the vote had even started. He had to come on television to postpone, simply because I think enough materials had not come in. So I sense I could hear your question, and I sense the fear behind your question. I also entertain that fear. If I'm going to if I'm going to use a machine for the first time for an exam, I will want to have been trained on it, so that the expertise, I'm comfortable with it, I know what buttons to press. It's not that day that I've then just had 2 days of practice. I hope this is one of the things that JEGA will take into consideration. Are all the machines here? When are you going to appoint the polling officers, and when are you going to train them? These are all issues that should be on the table.
Interesting thoughts, Professor Akinyemi. I can see some of your tweets there, and thanks for the company, whatever you're tweeting and mailing from. Let me just take one or two tweets from you. Arnie tweet says, the prof is eminently qualified to speak good sense on the polity. We hope that leaders will act in the interests of the people and the nation. And okay, she to say, I agree the strong statements are bad for the polity, but the fault is for security personnel. They should do their job. Then Loye Adeyemo says, what can the prof say about the economy in general? Well, Samsona says, hello Sharon, is it not possible for INEC to ask FG to declare a 2-day public holiday so everybody could collect their PVC and vote? Well, go ahead and send more tweets and emails. We'll take them on the program. But in the meantime, we go on a short break. And when we return, what's the hope of the implementation of the National Conference and its recommendation? Don't forget, Professor Akinyemi was the vice chairman of the conference. We'll be right back. Stay with us.